Okay, so I want to talk about a new monitor I have in my desk setup. This is my current competitive gaming desk setup up here in my bedroom. It's also where I sort of relax, chill out. I've spoken about this desk setup at length very recently actually, but today I've got an exciting new monitor that's probably the first I've ever tried with the 4th gen OLED panels coming from LG. So what I'm checking out today is the 27GX700A, I think it is, which is the world's first Tandem OLED gaming monitor. Now LG did send this monitor over for review, but they're not sponsoring this video. So they don't actually see this video before it goes live or anything. And all the thoughts, everything I'm talking about this monitor are my own thoughts. Now, the reason why I'm a little bit more excited about this one in particular is because I've really grown used to using the screen on my iPad M4 Pro, my M4 iPad Pro, and that actually has a Tandem OLED display. And if anybody's familiar with it, you know that thing gets insanely bright. Now, why that matters for some people is that mini LED displays typically get brighter than OLEDs. And now with like the 4th gen and the Tandem displays coming out on the OLED side of things, the brightness gets pumped way up, and that's where this one comes in, and it's a little bit more exciting for myself. Now, for context on what I'm doing on the daily, I'm watching a whole lot of media, I'm playing a whole ton of games, and I am a part-time content creator. Now, this probably works well for work and stuff, but that's not what this setup's about. So today I'm just talking about media, gaming, and a little bit of content creation. Now, most people are familiar with OLED panels already. So as for why this one gets a little bit special, again, that's gonna come down to that ability to get a heck of a lot brighter than previous. As mentioned, I love my iPad Pro, and that's literally the display I purposefully use to do things like editing my thumbnails when I'm throwing up a new video. And there's gonna be times where if I'm like watching a show or an anime or anything animated in general, I typically will actually watch it on my iPad just because of the screen alone. So now having that in sort of a monitor form is a huge bonus in terms of the actual viewability and the image of the actual display. And naturally as well, OLED panels have simply gotten better with time, which is awesome. So that's gonna be for things like the image itself, the brightness, of course, like I mentioned, as well as simple things like burn-in prevention. Those sort of things people really care about when it comes down to their OLED panels. So of course, any improvements are gonna be welcome. Now, for anybody who loves OLED technology, I am gonna nerd out a bit. I don't typically get technical when it comes down to these things, but I thought this one was a little bit interesting. I had to research what the heck a Tandem OLED is, and the best way I can put it is if I'm thinking about a tortilla versus bread. And when you take a tortilla, it's just one flat layer, and that's your OLED panel. Everything's all in one simple tortilla, whereas a Tandem OLED sort of breaks apart some of the layers. So in this case, a Tandem OLED will break apart the red and green color as its own layer, and then you also have 2 blue layers. And having these layers separately apart not only helps prevent degradation of your OLED panel over time, but that's what allows us to sort of stack more and get a higher brightness. If anybody's a tech wizard, please correct me, but that's my understanding of what a Tandem OLED is. If it makes my image brighter, I'm gonna love it. So that's where I'm at with this display. Now, for the people who totally geek out over specs and stuff, I'll leave a little bit of a pop-up here on what the actual nitty-gritty is on this display for specs. But we are gonna be getting some third-party certifications like VESA Display HDR True Black 500, which again will give us a bit of a better HDR image compared to something like True Black 400, which a lot of us have probably used already. You've also got Perfect Black certification from Underwriter Labs, if anybody's familiar with them. And Intertech has confirmed that the colors on here are gonna be as close to source as possible, which is awesome. So 100% in terms of the color reproduction. Wasn't expecting that from a gaming monitor. And again, as much as I'm not gonna measure it, this does have a peak brightness of 1500 nits in HDR. So yeah, for the people who love specs, that's gonna be pretty awesome. For myself, it's gonna be based more around the overall actual experience using this. Now, as for my setup in particular and what I have connected to it, there's gonna be 2 HDMI 2.1 ports. For myself, I've got my trusty Mac Mini here, which is what I use for editing when I am up here, for the odd time I am doing content creation up here, or otherwise, browsing the web or whatever else, HDMI 2.1. And then I have my Xbox Series X. I love my console gaming. I'm gonna talk more about gaming, of course, but right now my Xbox Series X is in this setup with the other HDMI 2.1 port, and you can't really see it, but under my desk I do have my RTX 4090 PC going through the DisplayPort 1.4. And beyond that, you do have 2 USB-A ports on the back end with an upstream link if you do want to put that towards your PC. I'm not personally using it, but if you have any sort of dongles or keyboards, whatever else, you can plug it into the back of the computer. And one thing I have spoken about in the past is hardwiring for audio. As much as I love my Bluetooth, my AirPods, and my wireless headsets, sometimes it is really nice to just plug in. And this does have a 4-pole DTS-X headphone jack, which is awesome whenever I do want to plug in my Sony H9 Mark IIs, which are flipping amazing, mind you. And actually there is going to be a little hole in the stand here for you to sort of route your cables into the back end here. Now, as for the actual overall build and design of this monitor, LG's done a good job over the last couple of years. The first monitor I fell in love with in terms of the, I guess, visual look and aesthetic was the 32GS95UE, which is their 4K 240Hz OLED. That's the one I'm still using in my studio setup downstairs. Love that monitor, and that's sort of translated over to this one here. Honestly, it doesn't have the overly gamer look and vibe. I don't like that overly gamer look and vibe. There's some, you know, minor RGBs on the back end there. If you dig it, you can turn that off or change it to any sort of color. For myself, I just set it to like a nice solid teal. It's not the most visible RGB, but you will see it in a dark room. But beyond that, I really dig the overall minimal aesthetic of this setup. I do feel like the stand itself probably could have been a little bit smaller, but again, that sort of matches my 4K OLED in the basement, so I'm not too worried about it. Beyond that, there's no like branded chin or anything, and the display itself is pretty much edge to edge when it comes down to the bezels. They're not too crazy. In terms of the stand adjustability, you're gonna have a height, tilt, pivot, and you can rotate this thing 90 degrees counterclockwise if that's something that you care to do. So yeah, the build design overall is excellent. I don't have any complaints. LG is probably the first company I've seen to really lean into the non-gamer aesthetic when it comes to their gaming monitors. So yes, keep doing that, LG. Now, naturally, of course, I'm gaming on this display, and that's where I spend most of my time, really, if I'm going to be doing anything on this monitor. And I sort of want to talk about PC gaming first. For anybody who's used an OLED monitor, I've been using them for about 3 or 4 years at this point. My first one was LG's, I think 240 hertz 1440p OLED. And honestly, the gaming experience overall is insane. So in terms of response time, that says is 0.03 milliseconds. Not that I'm really gonna test that. I'm not an anime protagonist either, so I don't even think I can notice that, even if it was a little bit slower, but everything's near instant for myself when I am gaming. I primarily, on PC, am leaning into my first person and third person shooters. So that's gonna be Overwatch and Marvel Rivals currently. I did a recent video a week or two ago where I've been really leaning into competitive gaming. So that's where something like this comes in for my competitive gamers. You're really gonna dig the sort of response time and stuff. Now for refresh rate, we're working with 280 hertz, which is excellent. My happy low end for refresh rates is about 160 hertz when it comes to competitive gaming. So to have 280, it's definitely a thumbs up for myself. And again, leading into that OLED panel, everything on here does look great. Now for the times I'm not playing competitive games, I'm usually gonna play something like World of Warcraft, Diablo. More recently is Baldur's Gate 3. Yes, I started another playthrough. That game is incredible. But the image on there is gonna look good, and that's where you can sort of lean into, I guess, the fidelity of whatever title you're playing. So that's where I sort of appreciate the versatility of an OLED panel. Pretty much whatever you're playing, it's gonna look awesome. For myself, I am using an RTX 4090 in my PC, so I'm definitely capping out that 280 hertz. Typically I can bump my graphics up as well, which is awesome. And I haven't experienced any sort of tearing or anything like that. This does have NVIDIA G-Sync, so it's gonna pair well with my RTX GPU. And whenever I am on my Series X, this does have AMD FreeSync Pro as well. So similar situation, there's no sort of graphical tearing issues like that because this is syncing up with all of your frames regardless. Since I work as an accountant during the day, sometimes I really just don't want to use a mouse and keyboard. So picking up a controller for myself is a little bit more relaxing. And I've talked about my Series X a lot this year. I've sort of just fallen in love with this thing all over again recently. And I've been diving a lot into Skate 4 is crazy with these wait times, man. The queues are like 20, 60,000 people sometimes, but I've been playing Skate 4, Claire Obscure, which is awesome, and then Tony Hawk's 3 and 4, which is great. I'm happy they remastered that. If you are using a console, naturally the refresh rate's gonna cap at 120 hertz. That's a console thing, of course. On there, you will still be getting a variable refresh rate and auto low latency mode. So for anybody who does throw down fast-paced games like Call of Duty or whatever, it's gonna work well on your console, whether that's PS5, Xbox, whatever the case. Likewise for myself, I've been really leaning into my Xbox, actually as a flippin' Blu-ray player. I wanna talk about media because again, going back into the Tandem OLED, this is one of the things where I've really sort of gotten a little bit more excited about because I started renting DVDs, actually sorry, Blu-rays from my local library, which is free, awesome, but it's easy to forget how good media looks at its best because I'm so used to streaming everything all the time. If you throw a Blu-ray into your console or your PlayStation or whatever the case may be, get a Blu-ray player, media looks amazing. I'm slowly becoming one of those cinematic nerds where I love studying color grading and framing and videography and everything in between when it comes down to movies. So I've actually started really enjoying Blu-rays. And with that, I could say having a brighter display like this where you can really get some solid contrast between certain scenes really makes a big difference to the actual viewing experience. Really dig that. I am a bit of a nerd for that now, which I wasn't before, and that sort of bleeds into my creation work. So I love practicing color grading. I've talked about this quite a bit as well. I'm not the best when it comes to color grading. You can roast me for color grading this video if you like, but I love practicing, and having a good display that has a high peak brightness makes a big difference. So for example, my studio display, my Apple Studio display has a peak brightness of I think 600 nits, and this compared to that is 1500 nits. So a bit of a big gap. So yeah, when it comes down to any sort of creative work, The display on here does an excellent job. And naturally, of course, that's going to be for any content you're watching as well. My mantra this year has been to slow down, watch more shows, play more games. And it's been enjoyable to say the least, and more so on a display like this. More nerd stats, of course, you're going to have 100% color reproduction per Intertech, like I mentioned. Third-party certifications for stuff like that is big for, you know, cinema buffs and any sort of colorist stuff like that. Likewise, this does have 99.5% DCI-P3 color gamut coverage. So you're pretty much going to be covered for all the artsy-fartsy stuff that I love doing, or otherwise just enjoying content and media on here. And for people who didn't know, the Xbox Series X actually has better color profiles than the PlayStation 5, as much as I love my PS5. That's why I use this one specifically for my cinema Blu-rays. As for the menus, if you are looking to adjust your color and stuff, you can customize all your profiles and stuff. For myself, I will mention I'm using the Gamer 1 profile. My systems, of course, are naturally set to HDR. And then there's a peak brightness option where you can set between off, low, and high. Of course, I'm going to use high, and then I put the actual monitor brightness to max as well. Beyond that, there are going to be some pre-made profiles depending on the games you're playing, or otherwise you can set something personal. And a question I've gotten a ton across a lot of my videos that I talk about monitors is if I've ever exhibited burn-in, and I haven't. I truly just set my monitor up to have the OLED pixel shift and the pixel refresh options on any OLED I use, whether it's LG, Sony, Samsung, whatever the case is, whatever OLED I'm using, I just let the monitor do its thing. Yes, I play a lot of games with static images. So World of Warcraft has, you know, specific UI elements, especially games like Marvels and Overwatch and Forza if I'm on my Xbox. All of these games have lots of static elements, and none of them have exhibited any sort of burn-in on my panels. So I figured I'd mention that. Just let the monitor do what it does and you should be okay. Otherwise, usage could be different. I'm not throwing down 8 or 10 hour sessions like I would have once, but that's just my personal experience. But yeah, overall excellent experience coming from my iPad Pro as my Tandem OLED panel. I'm stoked to see this technology in gaming monitors. I have other monitors that technically have higher refresh rates, but I think I'm leaning into this one because of the brightness. I appreciate the Tandem OLED. They did a damn good job. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, be sure to let me know down below. Sorry if I nerded out too much about it or if I sounded overly positive. Again, LG's not sponsoring this. They don't get to see this video. I just love dope tech, and this is one of those monitors, so I really dig it. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, be sure to leave them down below. I appreciate you guys watching till the end. Till next time.